own Amanda Schaffner to lead the conversation.
Hey.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, gentlemen. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Happy to be here.
So in the interest of time, I just want to jump right in. Can you guys set the stage, if you will? How did you guys meet? What was the first meeting like?
Oh my.
Good question.
Want to take it, fellas?
Sure. Are you asking me and Justin or me and Justin and Mark? All three of us.
You and Justin and Mark. I want to have this collaboration.
We should hear both stories. We should hear both sides.
I want to hear them in isolation. But here's what I remember.
We met at the University of Michigan, the three of us, when we were in college. No, I'm just being funny. Go ahead, Ben.
No, I remember this. There was a screening of the Les Mis movie, and Universal was doing inviting all these people from the theater community to come to the Les Mis movie. And I remember being on the subway and I saw this guy who's this, famous producer named Marc Platt. And I was like, oh my God, Marc Platt, I wonder if he's going to the Les Mis movie. And he was, and I remember talking to him in the subway. So that was the first time I remember meeting Mark. And then the three of us, I think, met. Justin, was it back after a show of Dogfight, maybe?
Yeah, I think so.
My first recollection is a general meeting we had in Los Angeles. I mean, besides the subway, then I know we had a.
He doesn't remember those. He doesn't remember those meetings.
Yeah, look, I guess we can't pinpoint exactly, but we started working together on La La Land, and that sort of led into many other opportunities to work together. Just because I so admired their talent and their work ethic, and we just had a good chemistry together in our approach to musical storytelling.
Yes, exactly. And obviously you guys have found that this little trio is highly, highly successful. And I want to kind of know from each of you, maybe, what do you think that special sauce is between the three of you? Why are you coming back to collaborate so often?
Oh,
Justin, why don't you take this one?
Oh my goodness. No, I think that it's a good question. I think that I think it's like an interesting combination of all being of the same mind in certain ways, and then all having very different skills that we all kind of put together. I think that sort of the way that we all look at musical storytelling and the way that we can tell stories, looking at character, looking at narrative, looking at sort of all the different ways you can use music to tell a story. I think early on in our collaboration, the three of us, we found that we all sort of spoke the same language on that. And we all, cared about a lot of the same things and revered a lot of the same works. And, our sort of, as we work together, our references of musical theater history and musical films is sort of just runs the gamut. And so we sort of have that sort of shorthand for working together. But I also think that we each sort of bring our own individual skills and things we care passionately about. And, we often find ourselves in healthy, friendly arguments in the best way possible, where we're each caring about a certain thing. And I think that works well in our collaboration because we're able to kind of move forward. I'm fighting for this and Ben is fighting for that and Mark is fighting for this. And we sort of find this way in that threesome pulling the story or the film or the project in all different directions. We sort of pull it to a place that none of us would have pulled it to, just on our own, or even, one or two of us working together. So, sometimes it's hard to describe that alchemy, but I think that there's a real kinship in what we all care about. And then there's really diverse opinions as well. And I think all of that works together.
Yeah, I can say from my perspective, first of all, I'm a big fan of the music of Pasek and Paul, and I love their music, and I love the way their music is so integrated into story and character. So it starts from a place for me of enormous respect, and then as you get to know people, that respect grows into affection and mutual interest. And the other thing I'll say, and what Justin was alluding to, is that in a working collaboration, it's great to be in a room where the best idea wins, because everybody is so respectful. I don't write melodies, I don't write lyrics, but I know from story and structure and experience for many years. So to sort of marry that all together, and for each of us to be able to say, wait a minute, what about taking a left turn here or a right turn there, and respect each other and really be able to work it through. And as a producer, I can say the ability to say, hey, that's terrific song, even a whole song. What about if you tried it a different way, and to have two artists who were like, oh, let's try that and put aside what they did and try something different is not just refreshing. I think it adds to the success ultimately of realizing the full potential of a project. And it works very well that way.
Yeah. Vince, did you ever get nervous? I mean, you guys are talking about this really beautiful kind of creative marriage between the three of you, but I have to imagine when you guys are obviously you saw him on the subway, you already know how revered of a producer he is. How was it for you getting to that kind of peer level with Marc?
Well, I don't think we'll ever get to that peer level.
Exactly.
We'll keep trying. But I think honestly, at a certain point, the fact that he respects us in the way that he just articulated, and the fact that we respect him, we really, I think, all are trying to create the best product possible. And when we get into the room, the first few times working together, maybe even the first year, I think we were like, oh, how are we allowed to rock the boat, or are we allowed to say this thing? But when you get feedback and support from somebody like Marc, who has such experience and is so wise and so entrenched in knowing the sort of rules of how to make great film, and he has done it so many times in great theater and television, then you feel like, oh, I guess my opinion and my perspective is valued here. And when someone creates that kind of environment, which Marc definitely did for us, it becomes a space where you then feel free to disagree. And that, it's already been alluded to earlier, but those kinds of disagreements, I think, are the things that make interesting work. And, what Justin was sort of saying, it's like, if one person is over here and one person is over here, we don't meet in the middle, we push the thing forward. And that, to me, is the really exciting part about working with people whose taste and opinion you trust. But when there is that creative friction, and that it's coming from a loving place and a good place of wanting to make the best thing possible, then, game on. I'll fight for what I think, and Marc will fight for what he thinks, and Justin will fight for what he thinks. And as long as we all know that it's not coming from a place of ego, it's coming from a place of how do we make the best character and song moment and holistic thing possible, then that's a real beauty. And that comes from somebody who's being in a position of, authority or power, like Marc, giving us that space to say, hey, we're safe to be able to be a real player here and have a seat at this table and really say things that that challenge me, and that's a very empowering thing.
Yeah, and I have to imagine too that exact kind of spirit of what you're talking about, of pushing someone forward and of really kind of digging into each other's strengths. That I have to imagine that came very easily for all three of you, because you kind of come from this theater-centric university experience. I actually found that very interesting about all three of you. Marc, you had said in a couple of interviews that you were involved in a lot of student productions when you were at University of Pennsylvania. And I thought that was interesting. I wanted to ask, in your work as a film producer and a film executive, did you ever find that early college experience kind of colored the way that you led your teams?
Yeah, absolutely. I went to Penn, which didn't have a separate musical theater program like Michigan, where the guys went, but had lots of student productions. So as a producer producing student productions, the scope of it is much smaller, and we're all putting on a show. But the problems that you have to learn how to solve are really the same.
Yeah.
How do you have a certain amount of money? How do you make it go? If it's new material, how do you make the material the best it can be? How do you cast? All the different questions, issues, problem solving. I actually felt as a student having to go and learn all that was a great education. And what I learned out of the classroom really was as valuable as what I learned in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. And Justin and Bench, for you guys, obviously the University of Michigan is, that theater program is very well known, and I think a lot of it has to do with the two of you coming out of that program. But what have you leaned on in that kind of early experience at the University of Michigan? What has kind of carried through with you, on these later Broadway productions and also your productions in Hollywood?
Yeah, so I think we were really lucky at Michigan where we had professors who really made us, I will say, and guided us to value all kinds of productions in musical theater in particular. I think personally for me, I came to college really liking contemporary work,
Right.
but to be able to learn how we got to the thing that I liked and all of the sort of gems and all of the work that had been done before, the contemporary stuff that I already knew, it created a real, reverence, for me for all of these writers of the past. And so I think that being instilled in us, we come back to that all the time. So, when we're writing a song, and it could be for a contemporary movie or a contemporary musical, the same problems of figuring out how to get a character to articulate something in a particular way, it's been this, the same in terms of, musical theater storytelling for the last, 100 years. And you can look to shows that you wouldn't think, have any relevance to what you're doing here. But oh my gosh, like in Carousel, the way that they express their love is by not actually saying that they love you. They say, oh, if I loved you. So how could we take that means of expression and apply it to something that's happening in 2020? And so I think that kind of reverence and being sort of taught classics and understanding why they not only were so great for their time, but also are so relevant today. It not only is something that you appreciate as a fan, but also as a creator, you can constantly go back to thinking, how did the best people for the last 80, 100 years solve these same problems that I need to solve while staring at a blank piece of paper? And University of Michigan really put a lot of importance on understanding, our history to understand how to move it forward, I think.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I'll say, since there's so many creators that are probably watching and tuning in on this, we went to the University of Michigan as actors, as musical theater performers, believe it or not. And now, that's obviously not what we do, but it taught us a couple of things. I think one is, we sort of had a very limited view of, okay, if we love musical theater, then you have to be an actor and whatever. And then we sort of found, no, like the love is a bigger scope. The love is of theater and a musical storytelling. And then we found our place in that. So it wasn't sort of being pigeonholed into, okay, we thought we were going to be actors, so we had to be actors. That being said, also the training that we received as actors, neither of us ever, we didn't go to college or go to graduate school or anything for musical theater songwriting. And there weren't at that time and still aren't tons of programs for that. So all of our writing comes from a place of having trained as performers, taking those same principles and sort of like reverse engineering them of sort of what's an actor going to need to tell this story. What is a character? Like if I'm playing this character, I'm looking for an objective in my song or a want, or what's the conflict. So much of our storytelling knowledge actually comes from training as actors. So I think it's also a really encouraging thing for musicians or storytellers, musical storytellers out there, that like all of that training is so valuable. And no matter where it comes from, we're a great example, I think, of we didn't study this, we studied something else. And I've never looked back and thought like, I wish I really studied something else, or that was all in vain or anything. It was still so crucial. And it is still what we lean on when we're writing songs today.
Yeah, it gives you a very a unique sensitivity too, I think, especially hearing you guys are huge champions, I think, of your cast and your crew, and it's never just about the two of you and what you guys have created. And I've always really respected that about how you guys talk about the projects that you work on. I also wanted to ask too, and this kind of goes for all three of you, Benj and Justin, for you guys, what were those early resources that you found to be really helpful in kind of jumpstarting your career? And Marc, I know that you are a huge mentor and a huge advocate for young creatives, and what kind of would you guys point to now that people can take advantage of?
I guess I'll start and I'll say for us, I think we benefited from having mentors, and those mentors came from, reaching out people in we reached out to one of our first mentors on Friendster, the social media network before MySpace and before Facebook, who gave, let us participate in interning for him over the summer. He's one of the co-creators of Avenue Q. But I think that sort of being let into those rooms is really, really vital. And so for me, and I think for Justin, we have been really, really lucky that we've gotten to be mentored by incredible people. Marc is, chief among those people who has sort of let us in the room and let us sit at those tables. And I think, now that we are getting older, and there are other people who are coming up, it's really looking back on all of the people who let us observe and let us in the room, like that totally changed our entire trajectory. And so thinking about how do we continue to do that for other people and create systems in place, that's a really, really important thing. There are many sort of practical places where, you can kind of study and kind of begin to learn anything from the BMI workshop. I know this is an ASCAP thing, and then there's ASCAP resources where you can
shout out to the Johnny Mercer Songwriting Festival. That was one of the very first, it's probably maybe the first or one of the first sort of festivals, training programs that we ever got to be part of as writers. We were still in college and we got to be part of the Johnny Mercer Songwriting Festival. We were where we met some of our mentors that stayed mentors for us for years and years and years was through ASCAP's development program. Yeah.
So, I mean, there are definitely places to go. And you just reaching out to your heroes. I mean, the thing about writers in general is that, there are very few people that actually are really trying to be musical theater writers. And so people are a lot more accessible than you think. And so for us, just taking swings at trying to reach out and attend shows and be in the rooms where things were being created. It was just us trying to take the initiative to meet those people. And hopefully, more programs and more opportunities are going to be created.
Yep.
So that everyone can have that kind of opportunity, which really can change a life.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, if we're talking about a successful collaboration between the three of you, we have to talk about The Greatest Showman. I think that's why a lot of people are here. I actually wanted to ask, this was not necessarily an instant success story. The early reviews that were coming out were, the best. It had a little bit of a rough start at the box office. Marc, I wondered if you ever let the doubt creep in for you, or did you always know that?
I actually did not produce The Greatest Showman and was involved, but I can tell you, I was a friend of the family to it. It was not the producer, but I can tell you that the movie did start off very slow, and a lot of people had a lot of doubt about it. And the reason it was so grabbed and grew incredibly was because of its music. It's not that there's not wonderful performances and beautiful design and beautiful direction by Michael Gracie, but what really captivated the world was the music of Justin Paul and Ben Pasek. And that really is a testament to them, for which I have very, very little, if nothing, to do with. But that is the story. That picture exploded really as the music became more, people experienced it and wanted to experience it over and over again because it thrilled them, it inspired them, and it moved them.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you think it is about the soundtrack? I know it's probably awkward to talk about your own music in this way, but for Justin and Benj, what do you think it is about the soundtrack that had the staying power? Why do you think it really did have a life of its own outside of the film?
I think that we were encouraged by our collaborators on the project to we sort of that project is really specific, but I think that people listening to this will understand that it was really always a balance of writing accessible sort of pop influenced music that also still told the stories and still captured what these characters were feeling. It was a different kind of songwriting, say, than we all were that we participated on La La Land, which was, I guess, its own kind of musical storytelling as well. Some of it a little bit more character specific, some of it a little more really woven into the story in certain ways. On The Greatest Showman, there was a desire that was really led by Michael Gracie, the director, that these songs, that was always his goal, and his assignment for us was, I want these songs to live outside the film. I want this to feel like, this is influenced by popular music and part of popular music. And so and he was not shy about telling us when he felt like something we wrote didn't do that, which was good, which was really, a helpful guide to us as we were trying to straddle that line between writing songs that tell the story and really capture what that character's feeling, but at the same time that can live on the radio or on some radio, I guess, or in that world. And we were grateful that somebody was really holding us to that assignment, sometimes, in very candid, frank words. But, that's like, as we talked about, like it's helpful to have collaborators that are honest with you, and that in the trust cocoon of, hey, we all respect each other here. That honesty can really help you grow as an artist.
I just want to just jump in and say too, just to compare also Showman and La La Land too. What is so unique about both of them is that, before either of them came out, I remember people saying, you're going to do a musical that feels like it's this throwback, and nobody had written an original musical and, since Newsies and whatever. And it was because of people like Mark and people at the studio, and Damien Chazelle and Justin Hurwitz, who, are our collaborators on it, Damien, the director, and Justin, who wrote the music for it, so sticking to a singular vision of what they wanted it to be and not compromising to try to make it pop when the world of the movie and the characters was authentically a world that wanted a very specific kind of musical style. In the same way, Greatest Showman was a world where it was all about the juxtaposition of a contemporary musical style with this old-fashioned world and character. So just credit where credit's due, because the producers and the collaborators that we had such a clear vision for what they wanted to do, and that music then reflected the vision of the characters and the world and the voice. And it could have been very, very easy for a studio or a producer to say on La La Land, for instance, like, well, these are contemporary characters, the songs need to sound contemporary. But because it was true to the way that it was written, I think that that's what made it successful. In the same way that Greatest Showman was true to the intent of what the vision was. And when producers and studio heads and writers are all aligned behind the world vision, then allowing that to come through can be a very powerful thing, and feel like you're not compromising what you're trying to make.
And the other thing I want to add to that, which about it really with regard to Greatest Showman, is beyond the wonderful, tuneful songs and great lyrics, the music production on that movie is fantastic. And Benj and Justin, along with Michael Gracie, really explored for months and months and turned over many stones to create a sound of them, not just the melody and the words, but the production of the music, which and didn't settle, which is one of the reasons I love working with them. Neither the two of them or Michael settled for the first or the second or the third. I can remember you guys going all over the place in search of what is the best music production that these songs will make. And they never gave up, not for a single note or a single word. And it paid off in great benefits, because what they finally arrived at was quite magnificent.
And what Mark is not saying is that he is going back to one of the first questions. That is the mind that he is of, and that's one of the reasons that we all collaborate so well together. Is Mark, as you can see from his work, does not settle. Does not give up. Fights for until the very last screening, the last second in the editing room. I think we all share that desire of just trying to make the best thing, and not putting our pencils down till we're told we have to put our pencils down. And I think we share that tenacity and passion for making something great. And sometimes it works, and sometimes it doesn't. But we always are looking back proud of the effort that we put forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that there are a lot of creators who are watching this, and I did want to take a little bit of a step back and talk a little bit practically, because I don't think that everyone really understands kind of the difference in creative control that you have on a Broadway production versus maybe the collaboration project on a Hollywood film or a television show. I know you guys are writing for television, and I would love for you guys to talk about the difference, even just a little bit.
Well, I mean, you guys as the artist maybe can speak to it. I can, traditionally, historically in the theater, the writer has reigned supreme.
Sure.
And on the film side of things, excuse me, it's either been the producer or often the director, because it's very much a filmmaker medium, because the director is drawing upon so many of the elements, not just the sonic elements and the music elements, but the visual elements, et cetera, et cetera. I would say, at least in my experience, and what I hope my experience have offered in terms of environments, is in the movie or the theater world, it is a true collaboration where, and it works both ways. I'm not afraid in the theater to say to a writer, I think we need to make a left turn here. And I'm not afraid in the film world, which is a work for hire, again, very kind of different, because in theater, often the work is licensed to the producer, the writers own it. In film and TV, it's all work for hire, which means a writer can be replaced. But I would hope in both, the way the best work has evolved is through collaboration. It is true that in the film world, there are studios, or in TV, there are networks who are like banks, financiers. They can exercise a lot of control. But hopefully, if you've been fortunate enough to have a lot of success, you get a lot of that control to yourself. And then if you're smart, you share it with your writers and your director, and that's how you protect the creative vision. And it's no different in theater, where now shows are very, very expensive. So there's that voice in it. But the best work belongs to the artist. And I can speak as a producer. I do see it as my job to create environments which can differ from artist to artist, where artists get to do his or her or their best work.
It's a really beautiful sentiment, and I love that explanation too. So thank you for being that specific. Musically, what do you guys keep in mind when you're writing songs for film and television, for the work that you guys have done? I mean, obviously you guys have alluded to it already. You're talking kind of, it seems like a lot of your songs are very character based, and a lot of the experience that you guys have had in that world have been such vibrant characters, and really characters that kind of have this beautiful journey to them. So I wondered if you could talk about, maybe when you're meeting a character for the first time, what's going through your mind? Do you start with lyrics? Do you start with music? What's kind of been your process?
Want to take it? Want me to take it?
Go for it.
Yeah. A great question. I think, if we're working on something, hopefully we already have sort of some buy-in that we think, okay, this can be a musical, or this should be a musical. There are characters that can sing. There are obstacles.
And Justin, what do you mean by characters that can sing? I feel like that'd be good to kind of.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. So there's great desire. There's great longing. There's great obstacle. There's great connection that wants to be made or needs to be made. There's these sort of bigger emotions, or inner tumult, or struggle, or whatever it is. Something for these characters to sing about is what we are usually looking for and drawn to. It helps to have an interesting world, an imagined world, a colorful world, a vivid world that often helps in sort of being able to immediately access what it might want to sound like, or what the music might want to feel like. But we lean really hard on our collaborators. I can't tell you the number of times we've spent, the number of hours we've spent in Marc's office, sitting with Marc and a writer, maybe other producers, or a few writers, and just dissecting and picking apart our characters, our story. We know that anything we write, if it's not based on a solid foundation of, this is a character in a moment that's right for a song moment, or this tracks through, this narrative arc works, we sort of, some people might feel like we delay doing our writing. And I'm sure some of that is just like, the average writer's like fear, procrastination, and panic. But then I think some of it is wanting to work from as solid a foundation as we can, because ultimately, if our songs don't feel like they are threaded finally into the narrative, and don't feel like they are coming organically from that character in that moment, they're not going to ultimately stand, right? So once we find that moment, and we all, we're very much like, you agree, we all agree, this can be a song, okay. Then we'll lean on our writer, our book writer, librettist, screenwriter, often, to write something that feels like it could be the song. We'll we'll often gobble up that material, or we'll talk about, here's a hook phrase, here's a title phrase that could really encapsulate what this character wants in this moment. And then from there, we start fleshing it out. But like, I think people would be surprised at how much of the process of our songwriting, at least, is a lot of talking way beforehand.
Yeah, and I'll say just like a quick thing, which is in general, if something feels like it's more from the heart, it feels like music is a really great place to begin. And if something feels like it's more from the head, then sometimes you really want to find that lyrical hook to be able to kind of deliver the intellectual idea of what you're trying to get at. Because as soon as you add music to something, it contains such emotionality that it really dictates, what the feeling of the song is. And so sometimes if you're really just trying to communicate like a patter song or something is really about the words and what we need to hear. But an emotional song is really about what you feel. And when they come together in those ways, that's the very best of all. But sometimes you want to start with one or the other, depending on how you want the song to sort of really hit and have impact.
Yeah. You guys have talked about this idea of musical storytelling a lot in this conversation, all three of you. And I've always found that has been such an integral part of kind of an individual's story. It's such a great part of learning about who you are as a person. We as a society have always leaned on it for, inspiration and education, for a better, understanding of the world that we live in. And so I wonder, what does the future of musical storytelling look like for you guys? What do you think is next for us?
Well, I mean, I'll just in a general global sense, I think the good news is that music and story and narrative are they're bound together in a way that culturally, the way we experience it is, there was a time it was hard to make musical films because you had to spend so much time thinking, why are these people singing in the middle of this movie?
Sure.
And I don't think that's a threshold anymore. I think people have grown up on television and film, even just on their phones, listening to music all day, where music is just a present character. And once that question disappears, then you can really delve into any subject matter. You can get into teenage isolation and suicide and anxiety, and actually set it to music in quite a beautiful way. So what one hopes is that what evolves is the kinds of the nature of the stories, that they continue to reflect the world we're living in, because the world we're living in is changing so fast. And that folks like Benj and Justin keep doing what they do so brilliantly, but they explore different stories and different viewpoints, and that it opens the doors for others to tell their stories, and that we are also participants in opening the doors for others, so that the variety of stories, of life experiences, of cultural and societal experiences through different and authentic lenses is told both musically, lyrically, and story. And I think I speak for the three of us, and we all want to be participants in that, both as writers, as storytellers, producers, but also as facilitators for others.
Absolutely. Beautifully said.
Yeah, beautifully said.
Not going to try to follow that up.
I know. I got nothing to add. Nothing to add.
Very well. So I often talk with our writers, especially when I get a lot of people who are coming to me asking about how to write for film and television. And I don't find, even in the work that I've done on the licensing side, I don't necessarily find that there's always necessarily a formula to writing for film and television. And so I always try to give them this advice of, you just should surprise and delight both yourself and the audience. And so one of the things I wanted to ask you guys, and I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, but what is something recently that has surprised and delighted you?
Oh, goodness.
Whether it's a musical or maybe a movie that you just saw, a book that you just read.
Well, I'm always surprised and delighted when I get a song from Benj and Justin, because they're so busy that they're to get one these days.
Yeah, he's saying, what he's saying is it doesn't happen quite often enough, is what he's saying.
Oh, gosh.
He's surprised when he gets one, because he's like, wow, they actually did their work.
I think we've all been in the era of COVID, everybody's consuming media, and there have been so many things that have inspired me. I saw the new Mindy Kaling show, which I just loved.
Yes.
And just getting to hear from, in a lot of ways, like, the same stories are told again and again, but like having fresh perspectives on how to tell them, and putting a young, teenage Indian girl living, in the suburbs through this sort of coming of age story, I thought was like refreshing and wonderful and beautiful. And it surprised and delighted me in all the best ways. And like finding the specificity of her voice while going through this sort of universal coming of age, but also the show was so much about dealing with grief. Yep. And how one deals with this catharsis of like letting go of the version of yourself that you have to be to kind of open yourself up to getting past that kind of pain. I mean, in a way, you could say that it's very similar to the plot of Dear Evan Hansen, but it's so specific to Mindy Kaling and her team and how they write and that specific character. So that's something recently that I was just delighted by, and I could watch it all over again.
Amazing. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. This has been such a great conversation and so rich of a conversation. Do you guys have any last advice that you would give to maybe a young theater writer or even a young writer who is looking to break into the film and television world? Do you have any kind of last bits of advice?
I mean, I'll say from my perspective, but then fellas, you should say, because you're writers, which is number one, keep going and keep dreaming. And put it out there, because material will speak for itself. And you live in a time of social media, and there's platforms, and there are many different ways to have your voices discovered. And even specifically, I'll say, there are many companies like my own that have internship programs. I have a very full internship program. It's not a writing internship. It is in the world of how you produce film, TV, and theater. But there are many writers, even musical theater writers, who have interned for 4 or 5 months. They're 4 months sequences, and they get to meet the Benj and Justins of the world. They get to sit in on meetings and writing meetings and story meetings. They get to go to a scoring stage. And even though you still have to go home and do the work and write the music and the lyrics, it's very valuable education. So my email's out there. My company's always open for that kind of internship.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point of like whatever you can do to find ways to just watch how things are made, whether it's like interning at a music studio or getting coffee, whatever it is. Like that those have been the most valuable learning experiences. As I said, we didn't train as writers specifically. A lot of it was learning as actors, yes, but then just watching other artists work in the room. And I think something that's going to happen right now in this moment is that we're going to see more and more ways made for all people to have access to those rooms and have access to finding a way to take a unpaid internship, or take opening up avenues for people to get into rooms and to see how things are made. Because until you do that, you can sit and should sit in your room or in your class or in your wherever and write and what comes from you and keep developing that. But then sort of the practical thing of making it happen, and how does this get built, and how do you work as a team, and how do you deal with personalities and all those dynamics. Getting into those rooms and just watching it is the most important thing. And right now, the most important thing is finding a way for everyone to get into those rooms.
Yeah, absolutely.
And lastly, just as Marc said, that Marc is so generous in saying to contact him, but like there are artists have emails, like find them, reach out to them, and people are so much more accessible than you think.
Thank you so much. You guys are so generous with your time and your advice.